At my father-in-law's funeral, my daughter-in-law whispered in my ear, "Your son and I secretly got married yesterday. There was no place for you." 7 days later she texted, "Pay the utilities. Urgent." I smirked. "Didn't I warn you?" Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. I bent down toward the coffin, the scent of lilies heavy in the chapel, when Megan leaned close enough for her breath to brush my ear. "Jake and I secretly got married yesterday. There was no place for you." Her whisper sliced through me sharper than any cry of grief. The air inside the chapel felt suddenly thin, like I had been locked in a freezer. The organ hummed faintly, mourners shifted in their pews, someone sniffled behind me, but all I heard were those 8 words repeating in my skull, each echo colder than the last. There was no place for me. At my father-in-law's funeral, a moment when family is supposed to draw tighter, like knit stitches pulling together against a tear, she chose to announce my exclusion. My knees buckled, but I forced them still, palms pressed to the varnished wood of the coffin. If I collapsed now, Megan would enjoy it. She sat only feet away, lips glossed, eyes bright not with grief but with triumph, her posture regal as if she had won something. And in a sense she had. For 3 years, I had been the quiet engine of their lives. Each month I paid their $500 utility bill. I told myself it was temporary, that Jake and Megan just needed a hand while starting out. I filled their fridge when it was bare, delivered groceries like some hired courier, though no one offered me gas money. I furnished their rental apartment piece by piece. A sofa, a dining table, bed frames, even curtains. Their comfort came at the cost of my own pension, and the inheritance my husband had left me. I told myself it was love. In my closet, behind a row of coats, still hangs a pale pink dress. I had bought it for $200, imagining the day of Jake's wedding. A gentle dress, soft fabric, the sort of color that flatters an aging woman without making her invisible. I pictured myself in the church pews, watching my only son make vows, smiling in photos I would frame and dust. The dress is still there, untouched, wrapped in dry cleaner's plastic, a shroud for an illusion. Because the wedding had already happened, and I hadn't been special enough to witness it. I had seen it all by accident on Megan's social media. She hadn't thought to hide it, or perhaps she had wanted me to see. Photos of her in white lace, her parents on either side of her, glasses of champagne raised in mid-toast, her siblings cheering, a rented hall decorated in lights. A happiness I had partly paid for with $800 Megan had asked for personal expenses just weeks earlier. I had believed her talk of bills and medical needs. Now I knew it had gone into satin and champagne. In my desk drawer at home there was still an envelope holding $1,000 sealed, waiting for the day I thought would come. I had scrubbed my house from corner to corner, polished the windows, cleaned the silverware. I imagined Jake and Megan returning after the ceremony, family in tow, celebrating in my living room. I rehearsed the moment in my head, pressing that envelope into Jake's palm, saying, "Your father would have wanted you to have this." But none of that had happened. Instead, at the coffin of the man who once called me daughter, Megan had whispered the truth. They had chosen a life where I was unnecessary, even in the role of witness. I stood by the coffin, eyes fixed on the folded hands of the man inside, my father-in-law, who had never in his life made me feel like an outsider. The roses around him blurred as water welled in my eyes. Jake sat only a few feet away, staring at the floor as if the carpet could swallow him whole. He couldn't even look at me. Megan leaned slightly against him, fingers brushing his sleeve, her chin lifted like a victor displaying her prize. The humiliation seared deeper because it was public. Not loud, not visible, but surgical. A private blow delivered in a crowded hall. No one else heard it, but I carried it like a brand across my chest. I thought of the years behind me, of how silently I had supported them. I remembered the winter when their heat had been shut off. Megan had called, her voice dripping with rehearsed panic. "Grace, it's freezing, we don't know what to do." I transferred $400 within the hour. That night I ate canned soup, but I pictured them warm and it comforted me. I remembered buying them a couch. Megan had sent me links, always tasteful, always slightly out of my price range. I had driven across town, swiped my card, and watched delivery men carry it into their apartment. I returned to my own home, my sofa sagging 20 years old, and told myself, they're young. They need it more. I remember Jake's car loan, the one I co-signed. He had promised, "Just for a year, Mom, until we stabilize." 3 years later, the monthly reminders still arrived, and I paid them faithfully. Each of these sacrifices I had told myself were seeds of love. One day I believed they would blossom into respect, into gratitude, into the closeness I longed for. But at the coffin, Megan's whisper revealed the truth. None of it had made me family. The words replayed sharper each time. There was no place for you. Not at the wedding. Not at their table. Not in their future. The chapel smelled of flowers and candle wax. Outside, autumn winds rattled the stained glass windows, scattering colored light across the pews. But inside me the light was gone. In its place spread a strange, calm darkness, not emptiness but clarity. I realized then that I had been an illusionist in my own life. I had dressed up sacrifice as love, wrapped silence in paper and ribbon, disguised neglect as patience. I had been waiting for a role in their story, a role they had never intended to give me. Jake kept his eyes down. Megan kept her chin high. And I finally understood. Inside me there was no plea, no begging question of why not me. There was only the cold knowledge of truth. I had been financing a life in which I had no seat, no title, no invitation. Not emptiness. Not grief. Clarity. Cold, merciless clarity. Exactly 7 days after the funeral, 7 days after Megan's whisper, my phone lit up with her name. A text short, imperious. Pay the utilities. Urgent. No hello. No softness. Just the command of someone who assumed my wallet was still open. I stared at the glowing letters. For 3 years I had obeyed those summons. I had treated every message like an alarm bell, rushing to the bank, transferring, bending, erasing myself to keep them comfortable. I used to panic when I saw urgent. I used to feel my chest tighten, my breath grow short. This time I smirked. My fingers tapped out an answer I had never dared before. Didn't I warn you? I only help special people. The silence on the other end was delicious. I imagined her blinking at the screen, her mouth tightening, her nails tapping on the glass table I had bought her. Minutes later the phone rang. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Grace." Her voice dripped with syrup now, soft, trembling, almost maternal. "You're like a mom to me. You wouldn't let us freeze, would you?" That voice, I knew it too well. It was the same one she used when she asked for money for her white dress. The same one she used when she pressed for help with the car, the sofa, the groceries. It was a performance. A tone rehearsed for maximum effect. But something inside me had changed since the funeral. The dress still hung in my closet, useless. The envelope of $1,000 still sat in my desk drawer, unopened. I could feel my anger not as fire, but as ice, steady, solid, impossible to melt. "I told you," I said evenly. "Special people only." And I hung up. For the first time the line had been drawn. And I knew it could not be crossed again. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I had once planned Jake's birthday parties, cut his school lunches, sorted bills for his college. I spread out papers, bank statements, old receipts, check stubs. I took out a notebook and a pen. My hand shook, not from weakness but from the weight of truth pressing down on me. I began tallying. Rent $500 a month for 3 years. $18,000. Groceries $200 a month at least. $7,200. Furniture, gifts, holidays, Megan's emergencies. Thousands more. Jake's car loan $2,500. Medical expenses $800. Repairs in their apartment $600. Living room set $1,200. The numbers built like stones on my chest until I finally wrote the total. $33,400. $33,400. In 3 years. Money I had drained from my pension. Money I had cut from my own meals, my own clothes, my own travel. Money from the inheritance my late husband had worked a lifetime to leave me. And for what? For silence at their wedding. For a whisper that declared me irrelevant. For the humiliation of realizing I had been nothing more than a living ATM with feelings. That night I cried, but it wasn't grief. It wasn't even sorrow for the money lost. It was rage. Rage at myself for buying scraps of borrowed loyalty. Rage at Jake for letting Megan sharpen her claws on my devotion. Rage at the years I had bent, begged, and believed. I went to bed with swollen eyes. But when I woke the next morning, the wrinkles in the mirror were the same. Only the eyes had changed. They were firmer. Colder. I brewed coffee, sat at the table, and for the first time in years I didn't check my phone in anticipation. I didn't wait for a call, a plea, a command. The silence in my kitchen was mine, and it felt holy. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and wrote a new list. Not of their bills. Not of their needs. Mine. A haircut long postponed. New curtains for my own living room. A trip to see Alice in Austin. Paints and brushes for the art I had abandoned years ago. I wrote slowly, carefully, as if the act of naming my own desires was rebellion. Each word felt like chiseling stone from a prison wall. And then, for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe. The phone rang again around noon. Jake this time. His name glowed like a wound across the screen. I stared at it until it went silent. 10 seconds later, Megan called. I let it ring. Then came another text. Please answer. We need you. I deleted it. The line had been drawn. That evening I walked past the park where I used to bring Jake as a child. I could still see him there in memory, little legs pumping on the swings, his voice calling, "Higher, Mom! Higher!" Back then he clung to me with trust. He believed my arms could protect him from the world. When did hugs become transactions? When did Mom turn into pay the utilities? When did love curdle into invoices? I didn't have the answers yet. But I knew one thing. The boy I raised was gone, and the man who remained was a debtor who saw his mother as collateral. And I, finally, belatedly, had learned to stop lending. The line was set in stone. It could not and would not be crossed again. The morning after I drew my line, I put on my navy coat, the one Jake always mocked as too old-fashioned, and walked to the credit union. The air outside was sharp, the kind that nips at your cheeks, but it woke something steady in me. My shoes clicked against the pavement with a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't walking to feed anyone else's hunger. I was walking to claim back what was mine. Inside, the bank smelled of paper, polish, and the faint perfume of the teller at the front desk. For 3 years I had come here like a supplicant, transferring funds to my son's account, arranging payments for his rent, his loans, his whims. I had watched my savings bleed out one slip of paper at a time. Mr. Parker, the branch manager, spotted me from his office. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples and the sort of careful kindness people in his position practiced daily. "Mrs. Hale," he said warmly, gesturing me in. "How can I help you today? Another transfer for your son?" I shook my head. "No, Mr. Parker. Today I'm here for myself." He tilted his head. "Go on. I want every automatic transfer canceled, every linked account severed, and I want protections put in place so that no one but me can touch my money." For a moment, silence. His brows furrowed, and I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He had watched the same numbers leave my account month after month. Perhaps he had wondered how long it would last. Perhaps he had pitied me. "Of course," he said carefully. "I'll prepare the forms." As I signed my name across the papers, my phone buzzed violently in my purse. Once, twice, 3 times. Jake. Then Megan. Then Jake again. I pressed the button, silencing it. I scrawled my signature on the last page with a hand steadier than it had been in years. When the pen left the paper, I felt something lift, as if 33,000 invisible pounds had rolled off my shoulders. "Mrs. Hale," Mr. Parker said gently, sliding the papers back into a folder. "I don't mean to intrude, but I've seen many things in this office. Sometimes generosity crosses into something else. Are you sure this is what you want?" I looked him in the eye. "Mr. Parker, what I want is simple. My money to be mine. My life to be mine. No one else's." He nodded, and for the first time in years, someone treated me like a woman making decisions rather than a resource to be mined. When I stepped back outside, the sun cut through the clouds. The air tasted different. Lighter. I walked through the park, past the swing set where Jake once called me his hero. I stood there a long time, staring at the empty chains. When had he stopped seeing me as his anchor and started seeing me as his lifeline to comfort? By the time I reached my house, 3 cars were already parked in front. Jake's sedan, Megan's compact, and a third I didn't recognize, sleek, gray, expensive looking. My stomach sank. I knew before I turned the key that they were inside. The door creaked open and my fears were confirmed. My living room, my sanctuary, had been invaded. Jake sat on my sofa, shoulders hunched, avoiding my gaze. Megan paced the rug, her heels clicking like a metronome of nerves. And at my dining table, leafing through my documents as if they belonged to him, sat a man in a tailored gray suit. I froze in the doorway. What is happening here? Megan spun toward me, her voice sugar-coated with false relief. Grace, thank God. We need to talk. I stepped inside slowly, eyes on the stranger. And who might you be? The man rose smoothly, extending his hand. Dr. Sloan. I'm an attorney. Your son and daughter-in-law asked me to assess your situation. Assess my situation? I repeated coldly. My eyes swept to the table. My bank statements, my property deed, my insurance papers, all scattered like playing cards. With my private papers? Jake finally looked up, his expression rehearsed, his voice laced with patronizing concern. Mom, we're worried about you. Cutting us off like this, not answering your phone. It's not like you. We think maybe you're not thinking clearly. Megan moved closer, reaching as if to take my hand. You've been under so much stress. Maybe loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, confusion can sneak up. Confusion. The word rang in my ears like a siren. So that was their angle. Not gratitude, not apology, guardianship. They wanted to paint me incompetent, confused, unstable. They wanted to turn my years of support into evidence of my decline. My voice came out sharper than I expected. I am not confused. I am not lonely. I am clearer now than I have ever been. And you are going to leave my house. Dr. Sloan interjected smoothly, placing a folder on the table. Mrs. Hale, please. No one is questioning your dignity. But sometimes it's best to have safeguards. A temporary power of attorney, for instance, just until you feel stronger. Jake and Megan only want to help. I picked up the folder, walked to the trash bin, and dropped it in without opening it. The thud was louder than any slap. Megan's mask cracked first. Her eyes narrowed, her voice rose. Everything you have will be ours anyway. We're just protecting it early. The words landed with the brutality of truth. In their minds, I was already dead, my savings already theirs, my home already deeded in their names. I pointed to the door. Out. Jake's voice hardened, defensive. Mom, you can't just cut us off. The rent, the car, the credit card you co-signed, you're tied to all of it. You can't just walk away. I can. I snapped, my voice steady as steel. And I have. For years, I financed a life that had no place for me. Those days are over. Dr. Sloan closed his briefcase, his tone cool but edged with threat. Mrs. Hale, if your behavior continues, we may have to pursue guardianship through the court. It's clear you're making irrational decisions. I took a step forward, meeting his eyes. 40 years of flawless money management. 25 years of widowhood without a single debt. A son raised, housed, educated. Every bill paid on time. Tell me, Dr. Sloan, what about that is irrational? For the first time, his confidence faltered. Out, I repeated. The three of them moved slowly, reluctantly, but they obeyed. Jake lingered in the doorway, his voice heavy with accusation. This is going to end badly for you, Mom. You'll end up alone. With no one. I looked at him, my own son, a stranger in my house. Jake, I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by choice, not by your neglect. I shut the door behind them. The echo reverberated through the empty rooms, louder than their threats, stronger than their presence. For the first time in years, silence felt not like abandonment but freedom. The silence after I closed the door on them lasted less than 48 hours. By Thursday afternoon they were back. Not with apologies, not with flowers, but with more performance. This time they arrived without warning, pulling up in their cars as if the driveway were theirs. Megan wore pale blue, her makeup subdued, her hair in a neat bun, the portrait of gentle concern. Jake looked rehearsed, too. His voice softened into false patience. And Dr. Sloan, the lawyer, carried another folder, heavier than the last. They sat in my living room as if it were a consultation room. Megan folded her hands over her knees, Her head tilted in an imitation of tenderness. "Grace," she began, "we're here because we care. We're worried about you. We just want to make sure you're safe." "Safe?" I asked, my arms crossed. "From what?" Dr. Sloan leaned forward, his words carefully measured. "From decline. From confusion. These things come suddenly. Sometimes it's wise to put protections in place before it's too late." He opened the folder and slid a sheaf of papers across the table. Power of attorney. Financial guardianship. My own name typed neatly on forms that would turn me into a dependent in my own home. I didn't touch them. "Grace," Jake said softly as if speaking to a child, "this is only temporary. Just until you feel better." I felt my spine stiffen. And when exactly do I feel better in your eyes? When my account is empty? When the house is in your name? Megan's expression faltered, just for a moment, and I saw the glint beneath the mask. She recovered quickly, pressing her palms together. "We're not your enemies. We're your family. We're trying to protect you from yourself." I leaned back, letting the silence hang. Then I picked up the folder and walked to the kitchen trash can. Without opening it, I dropped it inside. The hollow thud echoed through the house like a gavel strike. That was when their masks slipped. Megan's voice rose, sharp and venomous. "Everything you have will be ours anyway. Why drag this out? Why make it so hard?" Jake's face twisted with frustration. "Mom, you can't just erase us from your life. You owe us. Rent, the card you co-signed, you're tied to us whether you like it or not." I stood straighter than I had in years. "I don't owe you anything. For years, I financed a life where there was no place for me. Those debts are not mine. They're yours." Dr. Sloan's tone cooled to professional menace. "If this hostility continues, your son and daughter-in-law will have no choice but to file for guardianship through the courts. Your actions demonstrate impaired judgment." I took a step forward, my voice cutting clean. "Impaired judgment? 40 years of perfect records. Every mortgage payment made on time. Every tax filed. A widow who raised her son alone, who worked, who saved, who lived within her means, until the last 3 years when I allowed myself to be used. That is not confusion. That is clarity. You want my money. You want my house. And you will not get them." Megan *T to her feet, her voice shaking not with sadness but fury. "We made plans based on your help. We trusted you. We counted on you." "Counted on me to be an ATM with a pulse," I corrected. Jake's voice cracked. "Mom, please. Don't do this. We're family." "No," I said, pointing to the door. "Family does not sneak behind your back with lawyers. Family does not call you only when the bills are due. Family does not declare you unworthy of attending your own son's wedding. You are not family. You are creditors in search of a debtor." "Dear." Sloan snapped his briefcase shut, his eyes cold. "Then we'll see you in court." "Do your worst," I said evenly. They left in a storm of slammed doors and muttered curses. Jake paused at the threshold, his voice thick with anger. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll end up alone, with no one left to take care of you." I met his eyes, the same eyes that once lit up when he built towers of blocks in my kitchen, the eyes that once begged me to read one more bedtime story. Now they were the eyes of a man calculating an inheritance. "Jake," I said quietly, "I have been alone for a very long time. The only difference now is that I've stopped paying for the privilege." The door shut behind them, and then silence. But it wasn't the silence of abandonment anymore. It was the silence of altitude, of air thinning at a new height. It felt dangerous, exhilarating, terrifying, and mine. I stood in the middle of my living room, the air still humming with their threats, and realized something. The war had *N. The gloves were off. Their masks had fallen. And I, for the first time in decades, was ready to fight. The morning after their threats, I rose before dawn. The house was silent, but my heart was restless, beating with the weight of what I knew was coming. I brewed coffee, but the bitterness tasted different now, less of routine, more of battle. I had crossed the line, shut the tap, and thrown their power of attorney into the trash. Jake and Megan wouldn't retreat. I knew them well enough. They would double down. So I armed myself. By 8 o'clock I was seated in a downtown office, the blinds tilted to keep the sun sharp but indirect. Across from me sat Ms. Lawson, A woman in her 40s with a crisp navy suit and eyes that missed nothing. She specialized in elder rights, a fact I had discovered after a night of searching online, my fingers trembling not from fear but from the urgency of self-preservation. She listened without interruption as I laid it out. 3 years of transfers, every urgent call, every gift disguised as emergency, the secret wedding, the lawyer in my house with a folder of traps. When I finished, her pen stilled. "Mrs. Hale," she said firmly, "what you've described isn't generosity. It's financial abuse. And it's common. More common than you'd think." The word hit me like a gavel. Abuse. I had called it love, duty, sacrifice. She called it what it was. "We'll start with documentation," she continued. "Every transfer, every receipt, every message. We'll build a record. We'll secure your accounts, change your locks, install cameras, and we'll update your will to shield you against further manipulation." Her certainty steadied me. For the first time, I felt less like a foolish old woman and more like a soldier drawing up battle plans. When I left her office, the folder in my hands was thicker than when I arrived. But this time the weight didn't crush me. It armored me. That afternoon, I walked into the salon I hadn't set foot in for nearly 2 years. The bell above the door jingled, releasing a faint perfume of hairspray and lavender shampoo. Cynthia, my longtime stylist, blinked in surprise. "Grace? My goodness, I thought you'd disappeared." "I almost had," I said, lowering myself into the chair. Her scissors snipped through the tired strands, each lock falling like a discarded past version of myself. As she massaged color into my hair, she chatted, her children, her garden, her husband's new job. I realized with a pang that it had been years since I had listened to someone else's life without feeling the urge to compare, to excuse, to rush back to my son's crises. When Cynthia spun me toward the mirror, my reflection startled me. My hair was shorter, sharper, my nails painted a soft rose. "You look free," she said, and for the first time I believed it. Later my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my neighbor, Nora Brooks, holding a paper tray of steaming coffee. We had been neighbors for a decade, but our conversations had never stretched beyond polite greetings. "Thought you might like this," she said. Inside, over sips, I told her everything. To my surprise, she didn't gasp. She nodded knowingly. "I lived that story," she admitted. "First they make you indispensable. Then they invent constant fires for you to put out. And when you start to resist, they question your sanity." Her words were a mirror. I saw my years reflected back at me, stripped of my excuses. That evening, I called my sister Alice in Austin. 4 years, our conversations had been stiff, me boasting about Jake and Megan's milestones, her politely listening. But this time I told her the truth. The secret wedding, the lawyer, the threats. Alice's silence stretched. Then she sighed. "Grace, I need to tell you something. At family gatherings, Jake spoke of you like a service, not a person. And Megan, she always spoke about your house in the future tense. What she'd do when it was hers." It chilled me. Painful, but sobering. I ended the call with tears running down my cheeks, not of grief but of release. At least now the truth was in daylight. The next days became rituals of reclaiming. The locksmith, Mr. Nolan, changed my locks, his hands sure and quick. "New keys, new rules," he said with a grin. Luke, a local technician, installed discreet cameras around the perimeter. The soft click of the lens as it turned made me feel less alone. At night, I wrote in a journal I hadn't touched since my husband died. Entry after entry poured out. How I had mistaken money for love, how silence had become a cage, how my son had grown into a stranger I couldn't recognize. But in between, I wrote new things. The way the coffee smelled in my kitchen when it was only mine. The way the sunlight touched the roses in my yard. The satisfaction of saying no without apology. For the first time in decades, I began to live not as someone's provider, but as myself. One evening, Nora invited me over. Her kitchen smelled of cinnamon, the table crowded with mugs and pastries. Around it sat 4 women, all close to my age. "Grace," Nora said, "these are friends from the garden club. I thought you might like to meet them." Their stories spilled out like echoes of my own. Maria, whose brother drained her savings. Carmen, whose daughter called only for money. Alfreda, 80 years old, who discovered her grandchildren had already divvied up her estate in their minds. When I told mine, Alfreda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Love can't be bought. If you had to pay, it wasn't love. Her words settled deep, a bomb and a blade at once. That night, walking home under the stars, I felt something shift. 4 years, my life had orbited around Jake's needs, Megan's demands, their emergencies. Now, I was learning to build a life centered on myself. Defense, yes, but also living. I locked my new door, checked the glowing cameras, and poured myself a glass of wine. The house was quiet, but it was mine. The war wasn't over. I knew they'd be back. But tonight, in this small moment, I allowed myself peace. I sat at the table, pen in hand, journal open, and wrote the truth I had finally accepted. I am not confused. I am not broken. I am not theirs. I am mine. The week after I hired Ms. Lawson blurred into papers, signatures, and meetings. What once would have drained me now steadied me. Each page signed, each account moved, each lock changed was a stitch in a new armor. The first shield came in the form of a temporary restraining order. Lawson slid the papers across her desk with the confidence of someone who had drawn them 100 times before. This will make it clear. They may not step foot on your property. They may not harass you. Any violation and the police step in. I held the papers in my hands, my name stamped beside the words protected party. 4 years Jake and Megan had held the power, the constant pull of urgent texts, the unannounced visits, the keys to my door. Now the law itself had become a wall between us. I slept better that night, the cameras humming softly, recording the dark street. But peace didn't last. By Saturday afternoon I saw them through the glass. Jake's car pulling into the drive, Megan's compact close behind. This time they brought witnesses. 2 people I didn't recognize trailed behind them, clipboards in hand, their postures rehearsed. I didn't open the door. Instead I dialed Lawson. She arrived within minutes, heels clicking across the pavement just as the police cruiser pulled up. From my window, I watched the scene unfold on my own front lawn. Jake's voice rose, his hands cutting the air. We're family. You can't keep us from her. Lawson's reply was calm, surgical. Family doesn't drag in lawyers to steal guardianship. Family doesn't enter houses without permission. Family doesn't reduce mothers to ATMs. Megan's eyes brimmed with tears, the same practiced tears that had once loosened my purse strings. We just need help with bills, she wailed, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. She must pay. She always did. Lawson's voice cut like steel. From now on, Mrs. Hale pays only through her lawyer, me. If you need something, file a request. But you will not bully her again. The officers stood between us, their presence making clear what the paper shield already promised. The rules had changed. My son's voice cracked as he tried one last time. Mom, say something. Tell them this isn't you. From behind the glass, I lifted my chin and shook my head. For once, silence was louder than any defense. The police escorted them back to their cars. Engines revved, tires squealed, and they were gone. But the echo of their anger lingered on the curb. That evening, I carried a tray of muffins to Nora's house across the street. Her kitchen smelled of cinnamon again. The table crowded with people she introduced as friends from the garden club. Grace, meet Maria, Carmen, Alfreda, she said. They've all lived what you're living. The women greeted me not with pity but with recognition. They didn't ask, why didn't you stop sooner? They didn't ask, how could your son do this? They asked something different. How did you sleep last night? 4 years, the only questions I'd fielded were about bills, due dates, transfers. Now I sat among people who asked about me. It was disarming. It was healing. Alfreda, her silver hair tied neatly in a bun, leaned close and whispered, love can't be bought. If you had to pay for it, it was never love. The word struck again, and this time I didn't flinch. I let them settle deep and permanent. The days that followed were quieter than I remembered life could be. In the mornings I brewed tea instead of coffee, letting the steam curl slowly above the cup. I sat in the garden, trimming the roses I had neglected while chasing my son's emergencies. The petals were soft, fragile, but their thorns stood sharp. I understood them now. I pulled my paints from the closet, brushes stiff, canvases still sealed. With each stroke, color returned not just to paper but to my days. In the afternoons, I joined Nora and her friends. We spoke of books, gardens, travels, Ordinary conversations that felt extraordinary because they weren't demands. No one asked for money. No one implied I was losing my mind. But peace came laced with vigilance. On the cameras, I saw Jake's car cruise slowly down the block. Megan's compact parked for 10 minutes at the corner, then pulled away. Once, I saw them together, sitting in the car, staring at my house as if it were prey behind glass. I wrote it all down in a notebook. The dates, the times, the length of their stays. Lawson told me every entry mattered. This builds your shield, she explained. When they try again, and they will, we'll have proof of their obsession. At night, when the house was quiet and the cameras glowed, I sat at my desk and leafed through the folder Lawson had built for me. Each receipt, each transfer, each text was a brick in a wall I was finally standing behind. I wasn't naive. I knew Jake and Megan weren't done. They would come back with new tactics, new allies, new lies. But now, for the first time in years, I was ready. The tap was off. The paper shields were up. And though their headlights still circled my street like wolves in the dark, the lights of the law, steady, unblinking, burned brighter. It came on a Wednesday morning, the knock that wasn't friendly, the ring that wasn't neighborly. Through the window I saw a woman in a dark blazer, a folder clutched under her arm, her posture official. Not a neighbor. Not a friend. Authority. I opened the door cautiously. Mrs. Hale. Her voice was polished, professional. My name is Ms. Harris. I'm with Adult Protective Services. We've received reports of sudden financial changes, possible confusion and isolation. I need to conduct a wellness check. The words fell heavy. Reports. Confusion. Isolation. I could hear Megan's voice in them, the sly twist of phrases she had perfected. I didn't answer at once. Instead I said, "You may come in, but I'm calling my attorney. She'll be present for every word." Within half an hour, Lawson arrived, her heels firm against the floor, her briefcase snapping open with practiced efficiency. She slid a folder across the table before Harris could even begin. "You'll want to see this. Documented transfers totaling $33,400 in 3 years. Evidence of trespassing. Pressure for power of attorney. Threats of guardianship. All initiated by her son and daughter-in-law." Harris blinked, pen hovering, the script in her mind already beginning to unravel. She cleared her throat. "Still, we must proceed. Mrs. Hale, I have some questions. Are your bills current?" "Yes," I replied evenly. "Everyone." "Is your home maintained?" "Clean, repaired, garden tended. Cameras installed for security." "Do you take any medications?" "Vitamins. Occasional aspirin. Recent medical exams all clean." Lawson added, "Independent medical reports are available, confirming mental competence." Harris scribbled, her eyes darting between us. "What about isolation? We've been told you've cut off contact with family." I folded my hands steady. "I've cut off contact with those who abused me. I have neighbors, friends, a sister in Austin. I am far from isolated. I am protected." The social worker hesitated, the weight of the folder Lawson had placed before her clearly shifting her stance. She glanced at the documents again. Texts from Megan demanding money, Jake's messages dripping with entitlement, the bank records proving every so-called gift was mine. After a long pause, Harris closed her folder. "Mrs. Hale, based on what I've seen and the evidence presented, I see no reason to pursue intervention. Your case is closed." Relief washed over me, but Lawson's expression remained grim. "Expect escalation," she murmured once Harris had left. "They'll take this as a loss and come harder next time. Likely through court." That evening, shaken, I called Alice in Austin. She didn't sound surprised. "Grace," she said softly, "they'll burn everything to get to your money. Don't expect decency. Expect persistence." Her words hit harder than Harris's questions. There was no bottom to their hunger. But even in the heaviness there was light. The next day, the garden club gathered at Nora's again. Coffee steamed on the table, pastries crumbled under fingers. I told them about the visit, about Harris, about the accusations of paranoia because of cameras. Maria snorted. "Paranoia? I installed cameras after my brother tried to break into my garage. Protection is not paranoia. It's survival." Carmen nodded fiercely. "They always twist it. First they call you generous, then they call you unstable. It's a script. And Alfreda, steady as ever, tapped her mug and said, "Love can't be bought. If you had to pay, it wasn't love." She had said it before, but it carried deeper now, settling into me like a mantra. That night, I sat on my porch with the folder Lawson had built, flipping through the pages. Every number, every receipt was a stone in my fortress. My husband's inheritance, once bled out through guilt and manipulation, now shielded me through paper and ink. In the distance, headlights swept the street. Jake's car. Then Megan's. They slowed as they passed, silhouettes craning toward my house, eyes trying to pierce through the curtains. I didn't flinch. The cameras clicked, recording each moment, and I logged the time in my notebook. Not fear this time, evidence. I looked up at the stars above the roofline, the quiet of the night stretching wide. For years, silence had been my prison. Now it was my defense. They would try again. I knew it. But I also knew this. I was no longer trembling at the knock of a door. I was no longer bending at the sound of their demands. The wellness check had not been about wellness. It had been about control. And they had failed. I closed the folder, locked it in my desk, and whispered to the dark, "Not yours. Not ever again." The envelope came on a Friday morning, slid under my door as if it were a delivery. Heavy cream paper, stamped with the county court seal. My name in block letters. I didn't open it at once. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the thing as if by will alone I could change what was inside. Finally, with steady fingers, I tore it open. Petition for incompetence. Guardianship requested. My son's name at the top, his wife's just beneath. The words blurred for a moment, but I forced my eyes to focus. Their accusations laid out in black and white. Irrational financial behavior, paranoia evidenced by cameras, social isolation, refusal of medical help. Each line felt like a theft, not of money but of dignity. Lawson arrived within the hour. She spread the papers across my table, her expression unreadable. "This," she said, "is exactly what I warned you of. They've moved forward with a lawsuit." "What evidence do they have?" I asked. She read aloud, her voice clipped. Testimony from Megan, claiming sudden hostility and confusion. A statement from your neighbor, Mr. Pratt, describing you as secretive and erratic. And one from your pharmacist, Mr. Reed, implying you mismanaged your medications. My stomach turned. Pratt, the man across the street who had always scowled when visitors parked near his curb. And Reed, the timid pharmacist who had always been polite. Megan had twisted them both into E*P***NS. Lawson closed the folder. We fight fire with fire. We get statements too. Real ones. We gather witnesses who see you as you are, not as they paint you. And we secure medical proof of your competence. That afternoon we drove to the pharmacy. Mr. Reed's eyes widened when he saw me. "Mrs. Hale." I didn't expect. Lawson cut in sharply. "You signed a statement about my client. Did you know it was for a guardianship petition?" He stammered. "Megan came in. She said you weren't acting like yourself, that she was worried. She asked me to confirm what medications you filled. I told her just vitamins, occasional aspirin. Then she handed me a paper, said it was for insurance. I signed." "Insurance?" Lawson repeated flatly. "Do you realize your statement is being used to claim my client is incompetent?" His face flushed. No, I didn't. Please, I'll write another. I'll state clearly she has no prescriptions, no irregular behavior." "I didn't mean." I watched him scribble an apology in ink, his hands shaking. A pawn, not a villain, but still a piece they had moved. Next came Pratt. When Lawson and I knocked on his door, his expression was sour before we even spoke. "Oh, it's you," he muttered. "Mr. Pratt," Lawson began, "we understand you signed a statement about my client." "She's paranoid," he snapped. "Cameras everywhere, strange people coming and going, yelling at her family in the street. Everyone can see it." "Strange people," I said, my voice tight. "Those are my friends. The garden club. The lawyer protecting me. The locksmith changing my locks because your so-called concerned family broke into my home." He shrugged, unmoved. "Looks odd to me. Did you ever speak to me about it?" I asked. "No. Did you ever see me miss a bill, wander lost, forget your name?" No, he admitted grudgingly. Then your testimony is opinion, not fact. He slammed the door without answering. Lawson only sighed. Hostile neighbors are useful to them. But his statement is weak. We'll bury it with stronger evidence. The next week, I met with Dr. Moore, a specialist in elder competence Lawson recommended. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, she administered test after test. Memory, math, logic, problem solving. She asked about my finances, my routines, my medical history. At the end she smiled slightly. Mrs. Hale, your results are well above average for your age. You are clear, logical, and financially competent. I will prepare a full report. I left her office with the paper in hand, a shield against lies. Meanwhile at home I fortified. Mr. Nolan, the locksmith, had already changed the locks once. He returned to add reinforcement plates. Luke installed additional cameras, each one discreet but sharp, their quiet hum a comfort. Nora and her friends from the garden club promised testimony. Cynthia from the salon volunteered too. I've seen you every few weeks since the cut. You're not confused. You're freer than ever. Every piece added weight to my defense. Still fear lingered. At night I sat with my journal writing by lamplight. They are trying to erase me. Not just my money but my name, myself. Then I would flip to another page and write what anchored me. I pay my bills. I cook my meals. I paint, I read, I host friends. I am not theirs to claim. One evening the phone rang from a blocked number. Against my better judgment I answered. Megan's voice slid through the line. Grace, why are you doing this? You're forcing us into court. We don't want to hurt you. Hurt me? I said coldly. You excluded me from my son's wedding. You broke into my home. You lied to my neighbors and my pharmacist. And now you want to own me. Tell me, Megan, what word would you use? Her tone hardened. If you sign the papers, it all ends quietly. Otherwise, we'll make you look insane in front of a judge. Jake doesn't want to, but I'll do it. I laughed, sharp, humorless. I financed your wedding, your apartment, your car, your life. $33,000. The only insane thing is that I waited this long to stop. I hung up before she could reply. That night, as I walked through the house checking locks, I felt the cameras hum above me, recording the quiet street. I glanced at the folder Lawson had built, thick now heavy. Evidence, statements, witnesses, reports. Jake and Megan wanted a war. And for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid of one. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was reclamation. They had filed their lawsuit. I was ready for my countermoves. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, of paper that had absorbed decades of arguments. I sat on a hard bench outside courtroom 3B, my hands folded around the file Lawson had prepared. It was thick, heavy, the weight of 3 years of sacrifice turned into evidence. Inside, Judge Collins presided, a man with white hair and a voice that carried even when soft. When he called my name, my knees trembled, but not from weakness. From the gravity of walking into a room where my own son would argue I was incapable of living my life. Jake sat at the petitioner's table in a tailored suit, one I suspected I had once helped pay for. Megan beside him wore black, her makeup subtle, her eyes rimmed red, the portrait of a grieving, dutiful daughter-in-law. Between them, their attorney, Mr. Keene, a man with a gleaming tie and a voice honed to persuasion. Your Honor, Keene began, this is not an easy case. My clients love Mrs. Hale deeply. But love also means facing hard truths. In recent months, she has exhibited paranoia, financial recklessness, and isolation. We seek guardianship not for ourselves but for her safety. His words dripped with solemnity. I could almost believe them if I hadn't lived the truth. Lawson rose. Your Honor, what you will hear today is not love, but greed dressed in concern. We will show Mrs. Hale is competent, independent, and the victim of financial abuse, not its perpetrator. The parade began. Megan took the stand first. Her voice trembled, her hands clutched a tissue, her eyes glistened. Grace has changed. She forgets conversations, lashes out without reason. She spends erratically, cancels support we depended on. It's not her. We just want to help her. He nodded approvingly. Megan dabbed her eyes. When Lawson rose for cross-examination, her tone was surgical. Mrs. Hale, can you recall the last time you called my client without asking for money? Megan hesitated. We always talked about many things. A specific date? I don't remember. Is it true you and your husband were married without inviting her? Megan's face tightened. It was very small. Did you tell her, and I quote, "We only invited special people"? Color flooded Megan's cheeks. Those words were taken out of context. What context makes a mother-in-law not special enough for her own son's wedding? Silence. Megan shifted, tissue twisting in her hands. The mask of tenderness cracked, and in its place glared raw entitlement. Jake followed. My son. He swore to tell the truth with the same lips that had once whispered, "Higher, Mom, higher." On the swings. Now those lips shaped lies. Mom has become erratic. She won't answer calls. She wastes money. She listens to strangers more than her family. We're scared for her. Lawson's questions cut sharp. Mr. Hale, how much money has your mother given you in the last 3 years? I don't know. Does 33,400 sound right? He shifted. Maybe. She's always been generous. How many times did you visit her without asking for financial help? Jake's silence was the loudest sound in the courtroom. Is it true you entered her house without permission, bringing a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We were worried. Is it true you co-signed a car loan at 35 years old, relying on your 71-year-old mother to pay it? His voice cracked. We needed help. No further questions, Lawson said, her tone a blade left buried. Mr. Pratt, the hostile neighbor, testified next. He called me paranoid for installing cameras, strange for having new visitors, unstable for shouting at Jake and Megan. Lawson leaned in, her voice cool. Mr. Pratt, did you ever speak directly to my client about these concerns? No. So your testimony is based on assumptions. You never saw her mismanage money, wander lost, or forget your name. No. Thank you. His hostility evaporated into irrelevance. Then came Mr. Reed, the pharmacist. He looked uneasy as he swore in. I signed a paper, but I misunderstood. Mrs. Hale only buys vitamins and aspirin. No prescriptions. She has no issues managing medication. Gasps rippled softly through the courtroom. Dr. Moore followed, presenting my evaluation. Mrs. Hale's cognitive abilities are above average for her age. She is fully capable of managing finances and daily life. In my professional opinion, there is no evidence of incompetence. Each word was a stone dismantling the tower Jake and Megan had tried to build. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with slow steps, each one echoing in my ears. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, and sat. Lawson's questions were gentle. Mrs. Hale, can you tell the court what you provided your son and his wife over the past 3 years? Rent, utilities, groceries, furniture, car loans, emergencies that weren't emergencies. $33,400. And what did you receive in return? I swallowed. Exclusion. Silence. A wedding I was not invited to. A whisper at my father-in-law's coffin. There was no place for you. The courtroom stilled. Why did you stop supporting them? Lawson asked. Because I realized love that must be paid for is not love. I was financing a life in which I had no seat at the table. Do you regret your decision? I looked at Jake, at Megan, at the pale pink dress in my mind still hanging unworn in my closet. I regret only that it took me so long. Keene tried to shake me on cross. Isn't it true you installed cameras out of paranoia? Out of protection? Isn't it true you cut off your family suddenly? Suddenly? After 3 years of financing their lives? After being told I wasn't special enough for their wedding? That's not sudden. That's overdue. His mouth opened, but no words came. Closing arguments sealed the air. Keene pleaded for compassion and protection. Lawson thundered with precision. What we have seen here is not incompetence but clarity. Not decline but strength. The plaintiffs present no medical evidence, no proof of incapacity, only frustration at losing their source of income. Judge Collins retired to deliberate. 2 hours crawled like years. When he returned, his voice carried finality. The court finds Mrs. Hale fully competent. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, the evidence suggests financial motivation by the petitioners. This court will not enable exploitation under the guise of care. The gavel struck. The sound rang like liberation. Outside, the sun glared against the marble steps. Megan's face twisted with fury. Jake's eyes flickered with something that might have been regret, but he turned away. Lawson touched my shoulder. You did it. No, I thought. We did it. And I survived it. But victory felt less like triumph and more like a grave, the burial of illusions I had carried too long. I walked away from the courthouse lighter and lonelier, but free. The courthouse doors closed behind me like the gates of a prison I had finally walked out of. The autumn air stung my cheeks, brisk and alive. For weeks I had carried fear in my bones like lead. Now it was gone. What remained was exhaustion, and under it, a seed of something unfamiliar, freedom. Lawson had offered to drive me home, but I shook my head. I wanted to walk. The pavement rang beneath my shoes, steady, deliberate. Each step was a declaration. I am mine. At home, the house greeted me in silence. But this silence was not hollow anymore. It was expansive, like a room with its windows thrown open. I set the thick court file on the table, untouched now, unnecessary. The gavel had spoken. Jake and Megan could not touch me. Still, victory was not joy. It was clarity, sharp and unsparing. I had stood in court and watched my son swear that I was incompetent, watched his wife weep crocodile tears about a second mother. I had listened as they tried to turn my independence into illness, my caution into paranoia, my boundaries into decline. That wound would not close easily, but it was a wound I could live with. Better a wound than shackles. The next weeks I spent dismantling the old life I had built around them. I called a realtor. My house, the one Megan had once spoken of as if it were already hers, sold within a month. The proceeds, combined with the savings they hadn't managed to drain, gave me more than enough. I chose a bright apartment downtown, high up where the city lights glittered at night like a second sky. No lawn to mow, no rooms echoing with absence. Just enough space for me and no one else. From my balcony I watched the streets below, alive with strangers who owed me nothing. For the first time that anonymity felt like safety. Half of my money I donated to charities for victims of elder abuse. Let my years of humiliation at least become someone else's defense. The other half I kept for myself, and for the first time I meant it, myself. I traveled. Paris in the spring, where I ate croissants alone at cafes and didn't apologize for the solitude. Rome in the summer, where I walked through ruins older than betrayal itself. Barcelona in the fall, where I sat on a balcony with sangria and painted sunsets. No one called me confused. No one demanded rent money. The only bills I paid were for my own joy. When I returned, I filled my days with what I had abandoned. Workshops in art, my brush no longer stiff, but alive with color. Volunteer hours at a shelter, where my hands gave food without being twisted for repayment. Evenings at the community center, where laughter echoed without hidden hooks. I joined a book club. I joined a choir. I filled my apartment with canvases, with plants, with soft lamps that lit the walls in gold. And in all of it, I felt the quiet thrum of ownership. This is mine. This is me. Jake and Megan? I heard whispers, of course. From Alice, from neighbors. They had moved to a smaller apartment, bills pressing harder without my pension to prop them up. Megan had found a job, her first. Jake was restless, bitter. Perhaps need would teach them what generosity never could. Respect for work, for limits, for the people they once used. Perhaps not. But it was no longer my story to write. Sometimes I visited my husband's grave. I would bring roses, sit on the cool stone, and speak softly into the wind. I defended what you left me, I would tell him. Not just the money, the dignity, the freedom. I told him about Paris, about the choir, about the neighbor women who had become sisters in truth. And though he was gone, I felt him there, nodding in approval. One evening I laid my hand against the stone and whispered, "You'd be proud." I didn't let them take me. The wind stirred, and I chose to believe it was his answer. Now nights are different. I no longer sit awake waiting for texts that say urgent. I no longer calculate what I can cut from myself to keep others afloat. Instead, I count stars from my balcony. I count canvases drying on my easel. I count mornings where the only list of expenses belongs to me. Freedom is not loud. It does not celebrate. It breathes. Quiet, steady, patient. Sometimes I look at the pale pink dress still hanging in the back of my closet. I never wore it. I never will. But I don't throw it away. It reminds me of the illusion I shed, the dream I buried, the line I drew. It is not grief anymore. It is a monument. If you ask me now who I am, I will answer without hesitation. My name is Grace. I am 72. I survived betrayal by blood and by law. I stood in court accused of madness and I walked out free. And I have finally learned the lesson that cost me $33,000, 3 years, and a son I thought I knew. The most important person I must care for is myself. Love that demands payment is not love. Loyalty bought is not loyalty. And freedom is never too expensive. So I will live. On balconies, in art, in laughter that is mine alone. And if my story finds you, I ask only this. What would you have done in my place? And more urgently, what will you do in yours? Because the line is always there, waiting. The question is only when you will draw it.